This video is brought to you by Hegel. Hey guys, welcome back to the One Bit Podcast. Today we're going to be discussing how to make yourself happy with your stereo system and some, feedback on that. So for me, happiness is a very broad term. So when we were brainstorming about topics and this topic was brought up, I was just scratching my head going, how am I going to exactly tackle this? Because happiness, again, is very subjective. Some may find happiness in how pretty their gear looks or, how prestige their gear looks and so on, and care more about the gear aspect than the musical experience aspect. And then there's those that will say the opposite, where, if the gear disappears and all that's left is just you and the music, that's a hallmark of a happy, stereo system. So it really varies depending on who you are. But today we're here to give, from our perspective, a little bit of our 2 cents into how you can find the right system to bring you the happiness. So Sean, as someone who has immense experience in this field, what advice would you have for those out there?
Okay, so to start off, this video is probably going to be more useful to those who are more or less new to this hobby. Like maybe you heard your friend's stereo system, or maybe you've been listening to your dad's stereo system, but now it's time for you to build your own. And you're kind of wondering, where do I begin? And what steps can I take to best increase my odds of being satisfied with my purchase? And in my opinion, I think the first step towards achieving that goal is to make a list. And in this list, what you want to do is you want to write down certain things like, okay, what room are you going to be putting this stereo system in, right? And just note different things about that room. How big is that room? Is it a bedroom, or is it more of a large open space? And then you want to note, okay, well, there's going to be this one place where I want to put my stereo system. How far out can I reasonably put these speakers into this space? Do I have to put it right up against the wall, or can I pull them out a couple feet? Is it going to be an ultra near field setup to where your head is going to be like right next to the speakers, or are you going to be sitting pretty far away? Note all of these things, and then take note of how you tend to listen to music, even outside of a badass stereo system. Maybe you like to listen at soft volumes, maybe loud volumes. Note the type of music that you most often listen to, and just, again, make note of all of these different things and all these different habits. And once you get that list, you're going to have at least a starting point of the basic requirements that you will have for your stereo system. It needs to sound good with this music. It needs to play at this volume level well. And now that I know what my room dimensions are, it needs to play well in this type of space. And then after that, once you have your list, the second thing you want to do is to begin asking questions. Whether you go online to a forum, to, like a Discord, or whether in a YouTube comment section, or if you're lucky, maybe you have a dealer nearby. But take this list and then provide people who have more experience than you with your basic requirements. And that is a really good starting point to at least start to identify the type of products that may make you happy, whether it's a bookshelf speaker or a tower speaker, what have you. And also, don't forget your budget.
I think
a budget.
I think that's a really good advice, creating a list. And I think I did something similar, when I recently, actually, not related to hi-fi, but just buying things in general, right? When I bought my camera, I looked at, okay, what is my budget? What kind of frame rate do I need? What kind of feature do I need? And all those capabilities and so on. So I think, yes, it's not, please don't get lost in the specs. But I think it's important to realize the requirements that you need for your system. So for example, learn the basics, right? Like how sensitive speakers are is quite important in relation to how much power you're gonna need. So maybe look at sensitivity ratings, impedance loads, and the power required to drive those impedance and sensitivity loads optimally to a certain volume that you want in your room. So learning the basics can help and go a long way. But at the same time, if you are someone that's like, I just want a point and shoot camera, basically, right? I just want something that will sound good, start me off, and then I will learn as I, go. There's people out there just like kind of like me. They learn as they do instead of listening to it. They can listen to it 100 times, but they'll be like, I don't get it. I don't know what the sensitivity is. I don't know the importance of impedance. I don't want to know. It's not registering because I have not experienced it myself, what that is in the real life situation. So for those kind of people, I think there's so many chances today than we did back then, because a lot of budget gear has come a long way and they sound wonderful. And I found that budget gear tends to be more or less all-rounders. They try to please and try to be an all-round product. Whereas once you get up to the more higher end stuff, it becomes more specialized in certain aspects. It could be a very revealing speaker or a very inviting speaker, but it excels in certain ways. And we have a whole video on that topic, so I won't go further. You can watch that video. But basically, I think you really can't go too wrong with picking a product that is described as an all-rounder from various different reviews, and then choosing something like that to start off with. My advice is to not go overboard on your first purchase, because rarely is your first purchase is going to be the best experience you will ever have in a certain hobby. My first camera was not my best camera. My first car was never my first, best car. And my first computer was never my best computer I've ever had. So technology also evolves. So, having an initial experience gives you a good idea. Like, I started off with a $500 camera that had very limited capabilities, but once I mastered those capabilities, I knew what I wanted more. So when you get something, you can start taking notes and expand on that list that Sean was talking about on what you're missing from your current system, what you want more, and then that will aid you in your upgrade path later down the road, 2-3 years down the road. And when you watch a review, you can also note down, oh, I like that feature, or I like the sound of an R2R DAC that I don't have right now. And you can write those things down, and then that can be kind of used as your guide for your next upgrade. So that's kind of how I personally go about it in upgrading my stuff, whether it be cameras, audio gear, and so on.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that if you're tuning in and you're buying your very first stereo system, the good news is, as Jay mentioned earlier, most products today that are affordable are incredibly well-rounded, far better in that sense than products from, say, 20 or so years ago, to where you had to really and truly make the kind of the right moves here. It would be very easy to put together your first stereo system that didn't make you happy. But nowadays, I would say it's very easy to find a speaker that'll work well with a wide variety of music and a wide variety of rooms and a wide variety of equipment. A lot of the equipment today can power most affordable speakers just fine. So the good news is, if you're jumping into this, odds are you're going to get something good. And odds are it's going to be way, way better than what you're used to listening to your music on. So that's the good news, is, taking your first step is arguably the most intimidating step, but it's also this interesting moment in your journey to where it's the easiest to get really good sound. You don't have these crazy high expectations. You just want something that sounds better than what you're used to. And as Jay also mentioned, it's once you upgrade beyond that step is when things get a little bit more complicated. As you spend more money, the gear you buy becomes more critical. Like, you start to hear major differences between the recordings, which could be good or bad. Those more revealing speakers tend to require more in terms of placement. They're more sensitive to the equipment that you connect them to. So it's when you start upgrading is when you can end up in a situation where you may not necessarily be happy with your purchase. But in the beginning, it's actually pretty easy. But even then, I think to the next step is you have to be unafraid to give stuff a try. Because unless you're lucky enough to live in a major metropolitan area where you have plenty of dealers where you can walk in and you can get a feel for how a Kef sounds, how a Bowers Wilkins sounds, how a Dyne Audio sounds, a lot of us, we're just going to have to buy blind. And if you do that, I would say buy used, either on a local market or online on audiomart.com. It might be US Audio Mart or Canadian Audio Mart or Canuck Audio Mart, I think is what they call it. So if you're lucky enough to have that in your area, you might have to just bite the bullet, spend some money, Be smart about how you spend your money. Either go used or buy from a manufacturer or dealer that offers a trial period and get a taste for what it is that makes you happy.
Mm-hmm. And I will also say, the worst advice I've heard in hi-fi, and it's my personal opinion. Some may find this offensive because it's said quite a bit as a great advice, but personally, I find it to be a bad advice. And that advice is buy once, cry once. I don't think that's true. Like if I imagine myself buying, so my camera I'm using right now is significantly like 8, 9, 10 times more expensive than my first camera. But it has way more capabilities and pro features that I would have never imagined myself using a few years ago with that $500 camera.
Yeah.
So, and if I didn't have that $500 camera and the skills I learned while using that $500 camera, then I would never know how to use this camera to its fullest potential.
Yep.
Right. So I don't think that's true. I think, in my opinion, it should be the other way around. Your first purchase should be something that is, an all-rounder, best bang for your buck type of thing, so that you can get your feet wet and then understand and learn, use it as a learning experience on exactly what you want to nail down to have that perfect, happy system that you're looking for. And there's some criterias, there's some people that want to dissect the music, whether it's poorly recorded or, a really good recording. They just want to dissect it. They want to know the truth. And I've met few people like that in my journey, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But personally for me, I found myself multiple times with a system where I'm initially very impressed, right? I'm just like, wow, look at all that detail, bass, holy crap.
Yep.
But then over time, I end up playing like 10 of my top well-recorded tracks, my so-called audiophile test tracks. And I don't end up playing music that I actually enjoy day to day. And that, to me, is something that I don't look for, like that makes me not look forward to listening to my system because I'm limiting my music choices based on what sounds good in my system. I think a happy system for me is a system that I play any track, throw any track, don't have to worry about, this track sounding too shitty on this system specifically, throw on any track and be able to enjoy it. So what I'm trying to say is don't let the system limit the music choices and the music catalog that you have built.
Yeah, and this is all part of the discovery phase, which is you need to discover what it is that you like. What gets you going? And, to your point, like a lot of people will go into a store and they'll be drawn to the speaker that has the most detail, the biggest sound stage, it wraps around them, or maybe the strongest bass, and they're like, yeah, I want that, and they buy it. And then maybe over time they figure, maybe that's not for me. Or the opposite. Maybe somebody likes this warm and super smooth system at first because everything sounds good through it. But then over time they feel like, feels like everything was recorded in the same studio on the same mic and mixed by the same engineer. And, some people stay in those pockets. They like to be impressed every time they listen. Some people like to stay in that comfort zone of everything sounding smooth. But some people, like yourself, for example, you've been through all of that, and your happiness right now, at least, is kind of in the middle. You like something that's balanced. Yeah. And also, it's worth mentioning that even though I think one of the sacrosanct pieces of advice that you'll get from experienced audiophiles is the best system is the one that makes you completely melt into the music, right? Where you forget, ironically enough, you forget about your investment. You forget about your stereo system. You just sit there and you listen to music. You're excited to listen even when you're not there. Like, let's say you're out running errands or out at work and you're, man, I can't wait to go home and listen, dude. I think that's the mark of when you've reached happiness. But there are some people out there who don't feel that way. Some people, as you mentioned, they want something that is electrically accurate. They want something to be linear, and that is what makes them happy. Even if it tears apart poor recordings and limits what sounds good in their room, just the fact that they're getting, quote, the truth, unquote, is what does it for them. But typically you have to pass through the gates of experience to get there. You don't usually start that way unless you're like an engineer and you're just, you think like that.
So yeah, but my advice about, my thought process about buying once, crying once being a bad advice, understand that your taste also can evolve, I remember getting my first camera, again, that $500 camera, And I wanted something really punchy. And if you see my initial videos, they're like very contrasty, like over contrasty, because I like that contrast. In similar ways, when I first got into audio, I liked like a dark sound. Like I described it as warm, but it was like a warm, like taking a bath, like dark, really relaxing, really smooth out details, like stuff like that. But over time, I'm like, okay, now I care more about treble all of a sudden, right? Your taste evolves. So understand that, and that helps to understand why I personally believe that you should get something that's all-rounded in your first go. Because that can help you in kind of going towards, oh, you know what? I want more sparkle, or I want more warmth, or, you can kind of, base your change in taste and preference in your music and so on onto your next upgrade based on what you first get. So if you get something so expensive and so elaborate in your first try, you have also invested a lot of money, which can lead to chances of failure in terms of like synergistic matching and stuff like that. And you might not end up, so not only will you possibly not end up with a great sound after spending a lot of money and be bummed out, but you may also run into the problem of, oh, I initially loved it, but now I want something different.
Yeah.
Then you're going to end up with having to sell your really expensive pieces and switch to something else. And that's part of the journey. And, some people enjoy that, including myself. But a lot of people out there don't. So that's a mistake I would avoid if possible. And so, I would go with something that is an all-rounder for my first try. That's kind of how I personally do it.
I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, look, in most hobbies, you could find parallels, right? As you mentioned with cameras, you probably don't want to start off with a $20,000 camera with all these different features that you don't know how to actually use. Start off with, a basic camera, and then there you go. And then when it comes to cars, for example, I mean, you don't want to start off with a 600 horsepower rear wheel drive car as your first car. As awesome as that sounds, you'll probably kill yourself. You need to, work your way up to being familiar with driving first before you just start there. And I think it's the same with audio. I think you're going to be a lot happier starting with a more humble system, something that's designed to work well in a wide variety of situations, versus going for these exotic components that now you actually need experience and knowledge in order to best take advantage of them. You can't just slap all these well-reviewed components together at, like, say, $3,000 a piece and expect greatness. And that's a mistake a lot of people make.
And I feel like, talk about mistakes though, I feel like there's mixed advices with used gear, as well as visiting dealerships to kind of listen to different systems, as well as shows, right? So shows, dealership, used gear. What's your thought on those? Like, is that something you would recommend for kind of, aiding in people's purchasing decisions in hi-fi?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned that earlier, funnily enough. But yeah, I do think that's, it's critical to get real world experience where you can. But I would put an asterisk behind at least one thing. When you go and listen to these products, whether it's a dealer showroom or especially at a trade show, they're not always going to be set up for optimal performance. A lot of dealers, especially if a lower cost product, they're just going to have it set up in a room. It goes where it goes. And they may even have it networked through, a switching device and running to one amplifier. So it is not the most ideal circumstance to really get a feel for how the product performs. What you should listen for is just a generality, right? Oh, I think I like that more forward treble. Oh, I think I like that warmer sound. That can help. But while auditions can definitely help with, determining what it is that you like, just be aware that not every audition is going to be a 100% revelation of what the product actually sounds like, especially at trade shows where there's tons of people around, there's tons of background noise. They had to set up a system in a literal hotel room. It is not the same as having it in your own home.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say it's another tool to kind of narrow down and, kind of gain experience, right? But again, kind of going back to the camera analogy, but like, yeah, I visit camera stores, I play around with the camera there for a little bit, but that's not going to give me any actual, any kind of real life data if I take this camera outside and use it for my actual shoots, how that's going to turn out, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to be different lighting situations, different, everything. So yeah, you're going to have to be limited in what kind of conclusion you draw, but I would be careful to draw an absolute conclusion right off the bat, because there are times where, and you've seen this in my videos, where I saw a product at a show and I was like, it was okay. And then I got it in and I was like, oh my God, this is totally different. One of it being actually AccuFace, right?
You know how much you've annoyed me with this through the years.
I went from like Sean was a huge fan of AccuFace, and just up until recently, I was like, I think it's overpriced and stuff like this. And then I got it in, and I was like, yeah, my mind flipped, right? Like I went from to like I'm an AccuFace fanboy now. So yeah, so definitely your taste is gonna change. Your expectations can be different from what you experience at shows and dealerships. But with that being said, I think we'll finish it on this note. Sean, how would you know it's a good system that brings you happiness? Like, what's your hallmark, like personally speaking?
If it makes me excited to listen to music, and I think about it when I'm not home, or when I'm listening to music, after I'm done, I'm just happy. Yeah. You know, I'm just like, man, that was awesome. I'm so glad I invested the way I did into this system, because I don't need it to enjoy music, but this makes it so much better. To me, that is my own personal hallmark for when I think I've achieved a sound that is worth enjoying and not changing anytime soon. That's a good stopping point.
I would agree with that, you know, and there's going to be people out there that says like, oh, you know, the gear has to disappear, and you know, you don't care about the gear, it's just the music. But if you bought like an AccuFace piece, like that's not disappearing in my mind, it's there, you know, and that's okay too, you know, that's okay too. But I think personally for me, if I recall like true very, very happy moments of my hi-fi journey, one of it is me taking my top off, being in my boxer, back in my seat like this, sweating my ass off, listening to music with all tube gear in my JBL system with the JBL L300. And the story goes,
they're going to use.
Yeah, like, you know, winter is fine. Winter's great because it saves on heat bills. But when it comes to summer, it gets very hot in Canada as well. And when I come back from work, oh my God, I'm tired. I'm already sweating. And back then I didn't have AC. So I'll be literally drenched in sweat, back in my seat, having basically a sauna. And I still look forward to that experience, even though I hate being hot and I hate the heat. I went out of my way to listen to that system every time I was off work. And similar ways, again, back to the camera analogy, the cameras that I truly shoot with are the ones that I enjoy shooting with, that I would take out on a hot summer day just because I want to get a nice shot, right? It makes you look forward to those experiences. So that's kind of what I would look for in a system that brings you happiness. You know,
you have to suffer for it is your moral of the story here.
Well, you don't have to suffer for it, but like I'm just saying, if you enjoy the system so much that you get lost in the music to where you are completely fine with what you hate the most, like heat, I think that's a good general kind of idea of a happy system, a system that brings you happiness.
I've never reached that level of happiness, man. If I had no AC and I'm that miserable, there's no way in hell, dude.
Oh man, I think what it is like if it brings you tranquility, if it brings you happiness in the sense that it relaxes you, and you know, I realize that there's people out there that finds enjoyment in a more engaging process rather than a sit back, relax kind of process. They you know, again, like to dissect the music and listen into the music and all that kind of stuff. And that's okay too. But again, from my personal experience, I think what I personally find in happiness in my system is being able to throw any track into my system, sit back, enjoy it, relax. And therefore, you know, my overall preference have kind of went from being very warm and luscious to a more balanced type of sound where it is still warm, but just a hint of warmth, deviation from complete neutrality, right? So yeah, it's gonna be dependent on your taste, on, you know, how you listen to your music and what music you listen to, like we mentioned at the very beginning of this video. But I think you will know when you find that happiness in your system, that happy stopping point.
Yeah. So let's summarize real quick before we end it. So number one, make a list. when you have all these details down, and feel free to add to the list as you discover what it is you like and don't like. Write that down.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
I tried this Bright speaker. I don't like Bright. Or I tried it and I love it. Write that down. Ask questions and continue asking questions as you go about your journey. I mean, it's going to take a long time to get to a point to where you're genuinely not going to need some kind of assistance, right? I mean, there's always different variables to
Yeah.
explore.
And join forums. I have to mention,
Yeah.
join forums. We
A lot
also
of
have,
people to learn from.
yeah, I also have a Discord page where you can ask questions personally to me or to other Discord members. Like mix and mingle with people that enjoy this hobby, and you can share your experiences and, oh, I tried this, I found it this way. How about you? And these kind of conversations can lead to products that you've never even thought about. Watching reviews, reading reviews, going to shows, all these type of things can lead to you finding a product out there that, you will absolutely love and will be your absolute end game. And so a sweet stopping point. So I think, and you will always want more, that's just human nature. But there's definitely that point in time where you're like, you know what? This is
good.
Yeah, we good. This brings me happiness. I don't need to do more. And I think you will know when you get there.
Yeah. Otherwise, I'd say make a list, ask questions, audition if you can. If you can't, buy used or buy from retailers that offer a trial period. And then just go in with realistic expectations. You're never going to get perfection. Go with something a little humble if this is your first time. Even if you have a giant budget, go with something humble. And then learn from that. Experiment with it. Try pointing the speakers towards you and then away from you. Try different positioning tips or just different positioning options to see how speakers react with your room. Learn from it. Give yourself that opportunity. And then as time goes on, you can make smarter choices and see if those upgrades will increase your happiness even more. But it sounds more difficult than it really and truly is, especially nowadays with so much well-rounded gear.
It's really not that difficult. I mean, like I've had clients, and I think the best kind of clients, like the clients I go, oh, he knows what he's doing, right? Type of clients I've had when I used to work at the retail store are the ones where I go to install their Wilson Audio and ultra expensive hi-fi system, and I literally see a system that is not even 1/10 of the price.
Yeah.
And they're moving it to their bedroom system, right? They're like, yeah, this is gonna be my bedroom system. I rocked this for a while to find exactly what I was looking for. I would go listen to a dealer, compare it to what I have in my, setup, have the dealer potentially loan it out to you. They did multiple things to get to exactly where they want. So again, back to that, setting that realistic expectation and setting that initial budget, well under what you would normally spend.
Yeah. Yeah. And otherwise, that's it. The last thing is to just have fun. That's what it's supposed to be about.
Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much it from us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys on the next One Bit podcast. Until next time.
Peace.
We're driving cars on a Mars tonight. We're blasting off to the stars tonight.